Trump promised tariffs would bring factories roaring back to life. Instead, the most American of retailers, Walmart, is shuttering stores in 3 states and warning millions of shoppers to brace for price shocks.
Was Walmart really supposed to eat all the tariffs?
That single television rant captures the paradox. A policy sold as a patriotic shield is bleeding household budgets dry. Baby formula bananas, Barbie dolls, all climbing in price while paychecks stagnate. Bentonville's accountants crunch the numbers. Absorb a 145% levy on Chinese imports or pass it along. Even with razor-thin margins, the math was brutal. Prices leapt, shelves thinned, and in Lincolnwood, Plainfield, and Homewood, blue-vested associates clocked out for the last time. Behind the checkout lanes, executives scrambled. Supply chains rerouted overnight from Arkansas to Ahmedabad. Packaging switched from aluminum to fiberglass, robotics rolled into aisles once patrolled by hourly staff. Survival now trumped sentiment. Yet from the Oval Office came a truth social broadside. Walmart should stop blaming tariffs. Eat them. Economists offered a simpler translation. Tariffs are taxes. They don't vanish. They disperse onto balance sheets, price tags, and ultimately dinner tables. When the nation's price leader can't hold the line, the ripple spreads from suburban shopping carts to the bond desks of Tokyo. And so, a question hangs heavy over middle America. If even Walmart can't cushion the blow, who can? Tariffs weren't a tool, they were a ticking surcharge on everyday life. And that was just the beginning. May 15th, 2025, began like any other Wednesday in Bentonville. Sunrise glinted off the glass facade of the home office, cafeterias scenting the hallways with bacon, associates swapping Little League scores. At 9:06 a.m. Central, every Zebra Scanner smartwatch and desk monitor binged the same subject line, Tariff Impact, Immediate Response Required. Inside, the confidential PDF, CEO Doug McMillon laid it out without flourish. Starting June 1st, Walmart would hike prices on 7,842 core SKUs, freeze external hiring, trim payroll by 5%, and evaluate non-performing urban formats for potential closure by Q3. No exclamation marks, no everyday low prices rhetoric, just triage. Before team leads could gather their crews, screenshots leaked to financial Twitter. 20 minutes later, a CNBC churn screamed. Walmart surrenders price crown, tariffs blamed. Traders dumped shares, $24 billion in market cap evaporated by lunch. Meanwhile, store managers in Lincolnwood, Plainfield, and Homewood, 3 Chicago area locations long viewed as recession-proof, were handed a 6-sentence script to read at back-of-house huddles. Your store will close July 15th. Severance details forthcoming. Thank you for your service. Some associates sobbed under fluorescent stockroom lights. Others filmed TikToks of half-deflated yellow smiley, balloons drifting through abandoned aisles. Shoppers felt the aftershock first.
The prices are just too on the high side. It's on the high side, especially for middle-class, low-income earners.
His cart, once brimming with week-to-week staples, now held only cereal, rice, and off-brand diapers. Boxed cereal had jumped from $2.98 to $4.19, infant formula from $29.99 to $41.50, avocados from 79 cents to $1.29 apiece. In Plano, Texas, a grandmother filmed herself comparing last month's $72 receipt to the week's $106 total, snacks for the grandkids or my blood pressure meds. Pick one. Her clip racked up 2 million views in a day. Hashtag tariff tax. Back in Bentonville, analysts jammed conference lines, asking CFO John David Rainey why Walmart didn't simply eat the tariffs. Rainey was blunt. Every 1% duty increase cost the retailer roughly $380 million. At 30%, let alone the 145% peak, profit margins collapsed from 2% to negative. We can't make a nickel selling $1 for 95 cents, he told them. Wall Street agreed. The stock closed down 8%, slicing index fund pensions across the Midwest. In Washington, the president stoked the bonfire. At 5:47 a.m. the next morning, he blasted on Truth Social. Walmart should stop blaming tariffs, eat them. I'll be watching, and so will your customers. Tagging Rainey directly, Trump's post pulled 4.6 million views in 2 hours, fused by algorithmic outrage. His base threatened boycotts. Progressives pointed to proof that tariffs punished the very voters they were pitched to protect. Economists across the spectrum repeated a line that felt suddenly prophetic. Tariffs are taxes. You can't bully them into disappearing. Inside the Home Office, the atmosphere turned trench-like. Procurement chiefs sprinted through 36-hour call blocks with 12,000 suppliers. 2 choices: slash manufacturing costs or face delisting. Visual merchandising teams sketched sacrificial pricing maps. Milk, bread, and diapers would stay dirt cheap to anchor foot traffic. TVs, grills, and Barbie dolls could absorb the sticker shock. Even in-store McDonald's and nail salons were handed rent increases to squeeze pennies from every square foot. Yet spreadsheets couldn't conceal the human cost. Plainfield associate Maria Hernandez, 23 years on night shift, logged into the scheduling app to find the next 6 weeks stamped inactive. Her husband, a union trucker, had already lost 2 routes as import volume sagged. 2 incomes kneecapped by 1 trade policy, the exact opposite of the blue-collar revival promised on campaign stages. Critics on cable news argued that Walmart, with $15 billion in prior year profit, could afford to take the hit. But basic arithmetic killed that fantasy. A 2% margin means a 30% tariff vaporizes 15 years of incremental efficiency gains overnight. To offset a single dollar of duty, the company needed $50 in new top-line sales, an Everest in a market already gasping under inflation. Memorial Day weekend revealed the cultural fracture. Rollback reversal trended nationwide as viral photos showed $14.99 Barbies and $6.50 gallons of milk stamped #EatTheTariffs. Local papers from Des Moines to San Diego chronicled seniors skipping fresh fruit and parents rationing medication. The brand, once hailed as America's inflation firewall, was now the face of economic contagion. Union leaders seized the moment. United Food and Commercial Workers called an emergency webcast, accusing Walmart of weaponizing tariffs to accelerate automation. Meanwhile, 10 governors, red and blue, jointly penned a letter urging the White House to suspend duties on essential consumer staples before back-to-school chaos ignited. The administration balked, insisting the pain was short-term adjustment. For decades, a Walmart shutdown was as unthinkable as a McDonald's without burgers. Yet here it was, aisles dark, price placards rewritten, livelihoods in limbo. Parents explained empty shelves to curious kids. Retirees weighed gas money against groceries. Community fundraisers sprang up for laid-off associates once considered recession-proof. The low-price leader had blinked, and the country squeezed its eyes shut in disbelief, hoping the nightmare would pass. But nightmares created in policy don't end when you wake up. They follow you down the cereal aisle. This wasn't about politics. It was about survival. The sun hadn't yet cleared the Ozark horizon when Doug McMillon convened what insiders dubbed the War Room. 30 of Walmart's senior vice presidents filed into the concrete-lined bunker beneath the Home Office. No phones, no laptops, just printed dossiers and a single directive: rebuild the empire without America. The order sounded heretical, but the math was merciless. A 30% tariff on nearly everything Walmart imported meant the company's 2% margin had already flatlined. A repeat spike to 145% would be a corporate coronary. Survival demanded amputation. Lop off every domestically dependent artery and graft new ones overseas fast. By 10 a.m., global sourcing maps blanketed the table. Vietnam's Binh Duong province replaced Arkansas for apparel. Tamil Nadu's industrial corridor shoved Ohio plastics aside. Mexico's Baguio region became the new backbone for appliances once stamped "Made in the USA." The pivot wasn't theoretical. Bentonville wired $1.2 billion that week to secure factory capacity, skirting the just-announced tariffs with contracts denominated in pesos, rupees, and dong. Executives coined a chilling mantra: geo flip or die. Packaging got the axe next. Aluminum soup cans? Too tariff-heavy. Engineers switched to laminated fiber drums produced in India at half the duty. Juice bottles migrated from U.S. pet resin to recycled glass blown in Guadalajara. Even barcode stickers were redesigned to shave fractions of a cent. Micro-savings multiplied across 7,842 SKUs could claw back $310 million a quarter. CFO John David Rainey delivered the stakes in a midnight Slack post. Every 10 days, we delay costs $85 million in lost gross profit. Treat the calendar like a ticking bomb. Department heads responded with brutal ingenuity, mandating 24-hour quotation turnarounds, paying suppliers in crypto to dodge currency conversion delays, chartering direct sailings from Chittagong to Long Beach to bypass congested Chinese ports. When critics bristled that Bentonville was abandoning American workers, one vice president muttered, "Sentiment doesn't pay severance." Yet the optics were radioactive. 24 hours after the war room session, President Trump lit the fuse on national television. If Walmart won't absorb the cost, maybe Americans shouldn't absorb Walmart. The clip ricocheted across social media, but it was his earlier tirade that echoed loudest.
The prices are going to prices could rise, but suggesting that it should be Walmart who eats it rather than your average American.
What began as economic calculus now crackled with political voltage. Trump's Eat the Tariffs mantra aligned strange bedfellows, populists on the right, progressives on the left, both campaigning to punish the retail giant. Inside Walmart, the response was to double down, not dial back. Legal teams prepared white papers citing WTO statutes that framed retaliatory duties as force majeure, shielding the company from breach of contract lawsuits when it yanked orders from domestic suppliers. Government relations executives ran a parallel track, lobbying mid-level Treasury officials to recognize Walmart as an inflation pressure valve, hinting that further political attacks could boomerang into higher CPI prints by Christmas. Operations moved at blitzkrieg speed. Within 3 weeks, 450 sea freight lanes were rerouted. 1,600 import licenses were revised to non-UDS, country of origin codes, and a new AI-driven procurement platform, Project Sutra, matched currency hedges to commodity indexes in real time, saving an estimated $92 million in the first month alone. Stores in Phoenix and Tampa quietly piloted shelf tags listing country of purchase instead of country of origin, soft-launching the narrative that value, not geography, defined patriotism. The human fallout was immediate. A plastics plant in Canton, Ohio, received a stark email ending a 15-year supply relationship, effective in 30 days. 600 workers were furloughed by Friday. In Minneapolis, a sleepwear vendor pivoted to Etsy-size orders overnight. Union leaders called emergency press conferences accusing Walmart of exporting middle-class paychecks for shareholder pennies. The accusation stung, the decision stood. Investors, however, cheered. Shares clawed back half the previous week's losses on whispers that overseas pivoting could shave $2.1 billion in annualized costs. Credit default swaps on Walmart debt narrowed by 20 basis points, signaling renewed confidence. One hedge fund letter likened the retailer to a global supply chain octopus able to regrow any severed tentacle. But the geopolitical ripples spread wider. Costa Rica protested a sudden drop in banana orders as Walmart shifted to Colombian growers outside the tariff line of fire. The Indian government fast-tracked customs lanes for Bentonville shipments, seeing an opening to dethrone China in low-cost manufacturing. Mexican unions pressed for higher wages, arguing that the tariff dividend should not flow solely north of the border. Walmart's retreat became everyone else's battleground. By midsummer, the company released an internal dashboard. Tariff exposure down 73%. Import lead times up 19%. U.S. headcount down 8%. In Bentonville's polished corridors, executives framed it as a necessary compromise, jobs lost today to prevent a total collapse tomorrow. Outside, protesters waved placards reading "Roll back this," and patriotism isn't a spreadsheet. They were both right. Walmart's strategic retreat was neither betrayal nor benevolence. It was math cold, relentless, apolitical math. Tariffs had redrawn the borders of profitability, and Bentonville redrew its map accordingly. They didn't just move operations, they rewrote the rules. Bentonville had always flirted with automation, self-checkout lanes here, shelf-scanning robots there, but tariffs accelerated a transformation that felt less like evolution and more like detonation. Within weeks of the War Room decree, Walmart's executive committee authorized the single largest capital swing in company history, $6.8 billion earmarked for end-to-end, silicon-driven efficiency. The first wave hit distribution centers. Fleets of Symphony X5 pallet bots, flat, humming squares the size of twin mattresses, replaced forklift operators on the midnight shift. Guided by LiDAR and an in-house AI dubbed Nitro, the robots could map, pick, and stage 40 pallets an hour, double a human's rate with 0 coffee breaks. When local TV crews arrived to film the unveiling, Regional VP Carla Nguyen insisted the tech augmented our people. Yet, viewers noticed the loading bays behind her were eerily empty. No high-vis vests, no country music on the radios, just the whir of brushless motors. Next came the stores. Shoppers in Rogers, Arkansas, walked into what looked like a demo from a sci-fi expo. Ceiling-mounted cameras tracked inventory in real time. Autonomous floor scrubbers glided silently down frozen food aisles. Digital shelf tags blinked price updates pushed every 30 minutes by an algorithm comparing Amazon, Target, and Costco. The checkout experience shrank to one human greeter flanked by 30 touchscreens. Cash payments, a side alcove with a single staff lane, open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. only. For corporate strategists, the numbers were intoxicating. Internal dashboards showed labor expense per square foot in the pilot stores down 31%, shrinkage down 22%, and order picking speed for curbside pickup up 44%. A white paper projected that scaling the tech across 3,600 U.S. supercenters could erase $5.2 billion in annual payroll, more than enough to scrub tariff drag, and then some. Shareholders cheered. Hedge funds pounded the buy button. But on the ground, the mood turned glacial. Associates received text alerts redirecting them from cashiers to customer experience hosts, a euphemism for floating problem solvers who covered 5 self-checkout corridors at once. Full-time schedules splintered into gig-length shifts, guaranteed hours vanished. In Paducah, Kentucky, a 17-year employee found her 32-hour week chopped to 12, just enough, she joked bitterly, to pay for the gas it takes to get here. The backlash fizzed online under the hashtag #RobotRollback. Videos of customers wrestling with malfunctioning kiosks went viral. A Tennessee father live-streamed his toddler trapped between 2 pallet bots that didn't recognize obstacles under 3 feet. The clip racked up 8 million views before midnight and sparked an OSHA inquiry. Walmart's response was a canned statement about isolated glitches in the learning phase. Yet, glitches were the least of rural America's worries. Automation didn't merely displace cashiers, it amputated the community ecosystem that orbited each supercenter. When the Jackson, Mississippi store went 80% self-checkout, the Subway franchise inside lost morning sandwich traffic from night shift stalkers and shuttered within a month. The in-store hair salon followed, then the optometry kiosk. Each closure multiplied the sense of desertion. Behind closed doors, executives debated an ethical line item labeled social license. Could a retailer so entwined with Americana afford to look cold-blooded? Marketing pitched a soft-focus ad campaign. Families picking up online orders curbside while a smiling associate loads groceries so they can spend more time together. Finance vetoed the $40 million spot. Data showed emotional messaging barely nudged Net Promoter Scores, whereas a single-point reduction in checkout time boosted conversion by 4%. Technology vendors circled like hawks. Boston Dynamics demoed humanoid pickers capable of restocking top-shelf merchandise without ladders. Alphabet's Wing pitched drone delivery for prescriptions and last-minute baby formula, skipping both tariffs and traffic. Walmart greenlit limited trials. calculating that even partial adoption could squeeze another point of margin, enough to outpace tariff volatility for years. Political fallout escalated. Senators from Arkansas, Missouri, and Ohio co-sponsored the Humane Automation Act, proposing a 5-year moratorium on full autonomous retail in towns under 50,000 residents. Lobbyists labeled it industrial Luddism. The bill stalled, but the symbolism stuck. Main Street was rising against Machine Street. Inside the company, a generational divide sharpened. Younger executives, many poached from Amazon's robotics division, preached machine supremacy. Veterans warned that Walmart's brand equity wasn't price alone, it was presence. Smiling greeters, helpful clerks, human rhythm. A leaked Slack thread exposed the tension when a senior VP typed, "Robots don't vote, customers do." A junior director replied, "Robots also don't unionize." The thread ended with a skull and crossbones emoji and a directive to take the debate offline. By August, Wall Street digested the numbers. Q2 earnings beat expectations not through volume, but through velocity, more clicks, faster picks, fewer paychecks. Analysts lauded the automation avalanche as a surgical counter to tariffs. CNBC flashed a graphic, cost of tariffs, plus $4.1b cost savings from automation, $5.2b. Viewers marveled, displaced workers stared at pink slips, and just as Walmart replaced workers, the world started replacing us. The tremors from Bentonville rattled far beyond America's suburbs. For decades, Walmart's purchase orders had underwritten entire export sectors from Guadalajara to Guangzhou. Its bond offerings were treated as quasi-sovereign paper on Wall Street. When the retailer blinked, creditors noticed, and so did governments that once counted Walmart traffic as a proxy for U.S. consumer health. Tokyo reacted first. In late July, the Bank of Japan's weekly flow report revealed a quiet but telling move. Japanese institutions cut their holdings of U.S. consumer staple equities by 12%, reallocating 740 billion yen to domestic retail ETFs. A leaked memo from the Ministry of Economy spelled it out. Tariff volatility introduces exogenous risk. Limit exposure to tariff-sensitive U.S. names until legislative clarity returns. Translation: if Washington could weaponize import taxes overnight, America's safest retailer was no longer safe. Brussels followed. The European Central Bank's mid-quarter briefing downgraded its outlook for U.S. retail-linked corporate debt, citing policy unpredictability and automation overhang. Privately, Eurozone finance ministers were furious. Tariffs designed to bludgeon Beijing were shoving Walmart, Europe's largest single buyer of low-margin household goods, into India, Mexico, and Vietnam. German dishware factories in Thuringia reported a 26% order decline once Walmart shifted to Chennai ceramics. Italian textile mills complained that India offers a 15-year tax holiday. All we get are lectures about labor standards. Latin America felt the whiplash next. Costa Rica's banana exporters woke to find purchase forecasts slashed by 1/3. A Panamanian shipping broker described Bentonville's rerouting directive as a sudden desertion. Colombian growers, outside the high-tariff crosshairs, stepped in, prompting the Costa Rican trade minister to lodge a formal grievance with the U.S. State Department. Washington sent a polite auto-reply. Bentonville sent a purchase order, dated and signed. The currency markets amplified the exodus. Walmart's switch to peso and rupee-denominated contracts created a sudden demand for emerging market hedges. By August, J.P. Morgan's retail tariff basket showed the Mexican peso up 8.4% against the dollar since the first Walmart memo, while the Arkansas-based Simmons First National Bank reported a spike in small business loan defaults in counties where shuttered Walmart stores once anchored commerce. Credit desks on both coasts began muttering about tariff spread. The extra yield investors demanded to hold retail bonds exposed to White House whims. Walmart's 5-year notes widened 30 basis points in a week. A tremor, not a quake, yet enough to jolt CFO Rainey's capital expense models. He had planned a $4 billion refurbishment of legacy supercenters. Now the debt cost curve suggested delaying half the program or paying an added $120 million in annual interest. automation savings partly offset the hit, but the optics were brutal. Tariffs were not only taxing shoppers at checkout, they were taxing America in the bond pits of London and Singapore. Meanwhile, allies vocalized a geopolitical subtext few in Washington cared to confront. If the U.S. could strong-arm its flagship retailer, what protection did smaller partners have? At a Mercosur summit, Brazil's finance minister quipped, "We used to fear China's supply chain leverage. Now we fear America's policy mood swings." The line drew nervous laughter, and a standing order from Argentina to diversify grocery import channels away from U.S. giants. Even Canada, historically welded to Walmart's cross-border logistics, hedged its bets. The Canada Pension Plan trimmed exposure to U.S. big-box retailers by 5% and increased stakes in Loblaw and Shopify. A CPP research note concluded, U.S. tariff policy remains the single largest exogenous variable to North American retail stability. Ottawa diplomats were more blunt in private cables. Trump's populism is now an export, arriving in every checkout lane north of the border. Back home, the White House dismissed the tremors as market noise. Yet Treasury yields inched upward, and foreign central banks demanded wider discounts at auction. The Bureau of Economic Analysis quietly revised Q2 GDP estimates down by 0.2 points, citing retail inventory distortions. In a closed-door hearing, a senior Fed economist warned senators, the multiplier effect of Walmart's tariff pass-through is no longer theoretical, it's measurable. Few reporters caught the quote, but bond traders did. Futures implied a half-point drag on 2026 growth if tariff regimes persisted. Inside Walmart, a new dashboard tracked ally aversions, credit line shrinkage in Tokyo, inventory cancellations in Rotterdam, wholesale mark UPS in Sao Paulo. Each metric glowed red. A supply chain VP likened the view to watching the oxygen leave a room in slow motion. Bentonville's countermeasures bordered on geopolitical chess, offering long-term volume guarantees to Vietnamese and Indian suppliers in exchange for capacity exclusivity, locking in hedges against a weakening yuan to preempt future shocks, and hiring a former State Department trade lawyer to map tariff-free corridors under obscure bilateral pacts. Yet, no algorithm could quantify the reputational fissure. Walmart had long branded itself as Main Street's ally and Wall Street's rock. Now, allies in both camps were hedging away. When Reuters published an op-ed titled "The Day the World Stopped Trusting Walmart," shares dipped another 2%, not catastrophic but cumulative like water carving stone. At summer's end, BlackRock's global outlook summed up the new orthodoxy. Supply chains follow certainty, not slogans. Retail's gravitational center is tilting toward regions where tariff policy is predictable. Translation for American audiences: allies were stepping back, and once they pivoted, they rarely pivoted twice. And this time, the hit would come from within. By early September, the macro tremors recorded in Tokyo trading rooms were translating into micro-earthquakes on Main Street, USA. And nowhere felt the jolt harder than tiny Harrison, Arkansas, population 13,265. For years, the supercenter off Highway 65 had been the town's beating heart. 320 employees, 20 in-store franchises, and enough sales tax to fund 2 elementary schools and a volunteer fire department. Then came the tariff shock, the automation blitz, and finally the downsizing memo. Harrison would become a hub-and-spoke-light format, corporate shorthand for half the square footage, half the staff, and 0 night shifts. Within 48 hours, the dominoes began to topple. The night shift manager, a single mom named Patrice Walker, posted her layoff notice on Facebook. 12 years in the blue vest ends with a barcode saying "Position eliminated." Her story blew up, shared 18,000 times, featured on local TV. 2 doors down, Earl's Diner lost its graveyard shift crowd. By week's end, the neon open 24 hours sign flickered to darkness from midnight till dawn. The Shell station across the street cut operating hours. A microeconomy once synchronized to Walmart's round-the-clock pulse slipped into arrhythmia. The human toll defied spreadsheets. Harrison's food bank reported a 39% surge in demand by October. Families who once donated canned goods now queued for them. School Superintendent Linda Davenport convened an emergency board session. Falling sales tax receipts threatened to erase music and sports programs. "We're not budgeting for band uniforms," she told parents. "We're budgeting for lights and heat." When the school board raised the millage rate to plug the gap, retirees on fixed incomes protested, calling it a hidden tariff on property. Hundreds of miles north in Sandusky, Ohio, the story rhymed. Walmart's decision to drop a local plastic supplier under the GeoFlip agenda rippled across the Shoreline County. A factory that once molded vacuum-sealed food containers for Bentonville slowed to half-days, then went dark. The county development office estimated the closure would shave $7 million off the local GDP and vaporize 90% of the tax base for the Township Fire District. Of the 140 laid-off factory workers, 3 dozen took seasonal gigs at Cedar Point Amusement Park, earning half their previous wages with no benefits. The collapse wasn't confined to Walmart's payroll. Trucking routes shriveled as the retailer shifted freight to Mexican ports and Gulf railheads. Independent haulers, already squeezed by diesel prices, found contracts slashed midterm. One driver from Paducah calculated he would travel 15,000 fewer miles that quarter, a saving for Walmart, a death knell for his lease-to-own Peterbilt. Local radio stations filled airtime with classifieds for repossessed rigs. Even churches felt the strain. Pastor Carol Hughes of First Baptist Harrison said donations fell by a quarter in 2 months. Holiday toy drives turned into pleas for heating bill assistance. When Walmart coughs, she preached on a chilly Sunday, the whole county catches pneumonia. The congregation nodded, some wept. Journalists parachuted in, eager for sound bites. They found no shortage of voices.
Things that I used to buy, don't really buy them anymore, or I cut down on, most of, my list.
In truth, her lament echoed from Fresno to Fargo. Families trimming grocery lists to blunt price spikes on staples that once felt non-negotiable. Economists labeled the phenomenon tariff-induced retail retrenchment. Translation: every dollar Walmart saved through automation or foreign sourcing was a dollar siphoned out of U.S. payrolls, local tax coffers, and community commerce. A Kansas state study projected that for each supercenter shifting to hub-and-spoke light, the surrounding county would lose $14.2 million in annual economic activity and over 190 secondary jobs. Politicians scrambled. A bipartisan coalition in the House floated a tariff rebate for Rural Recovery Act, proposing federal grants to towns where tariff-related automation exceeded a 10% job loss threshold. But the bill stalled behind election year brinkmanship, condemned by deficit hawks as corporate welfare and by progressives as a license for offshoring. In Harrison, rallies grew angrier. Former night shift workers picketed the supercenter entry, holding signs reading "Prices up, paychecks down, and roll back our jobs." Management hired private security, further fraying trust. A leaked memo advised store leads to avoid the word tariff in customer interactions and to redirect complaints to company-wide cost factors. The memo went viral, drawing scorn from late-night hosts, and a harsh segment on NPR titled The Silence in Aisle 9. Thanksgiving arrived without Black Friday's usual frenzy. Walmart's automated inventory models predicted muted demand and ordered leaner stock. Shelves looked strangely tidy. Fewer toys, fewer TVs, fewer midnight shoppers wrapped in blankets, braving the cold for doorbusters that never came. Analysts would later note that holiday sales nationally dipped 2%, but in counties with downsized supercenters the plunge was closer to 7%. As winter set in, Patrice Walker took a job 30 miles away at an Amazon sorting center, 12-hour shifts, swing rotation. No guarantee the facility itself wouldn't automate next year. Earl's Diner slashed staff to a skeleton crew. The Shell station put up a for lease sign. Superintendent Davenport closed the middle school library 2 days a week. The fire department canceled its 4th of July fireworks fundraiser, citing economic uncertainty. In living rooms across America, the picture crystallized. Tariffs had not launched a manufacturing renaissance, they had sparked a retail retreat. Automation filled corporate ledgers, but left aisles echoing and paychecks evaporating. Walmart insisted the changes were about competitiveness. Main Street felt they were about abandonment. The American dream wasn't stolen. It was priced out. What began as an economic tactic has mutated into a cultural fracture. Walmart's pivot, like a weather vane, reveals which way America's winds truly blow. Tariffs didn't revive industry, they redirected it. Automation didn't create opportunity, it reduced it. And politicians didn't protect American labor. They outsourced its future to a spreadsheet. If even Walmart gave up on America First economics, what comes next? This isn't just about one company. It's about a system cracking under its own contradictions. Comment below. Should companies be forced to absorb tariff costs? Or is that just political theater?